I'm Ria. I'm not a Girl Genius Director, but I'm substituting in today. Today is the wonderful AMA with the one and only Pham. She is just an awesome person overall. She has a lot of experience when it comes to so many things in tech, especially when it comes to, running a business, startups, venture capital, all these different things. And if you did not know, which I'm sure you do, she was in 2017, she was under Forbes 30 under 30, which is, in my opinion, a very big deal. So we're super lucky to be able to talk to her today and ask her her most pressing questions. So yeah, anything else you want to add, Kim?
Sure. I can just do a super quick introduction. Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Kim. I am a first generation Vietnamese American and daughter of refugees. I was born in Boston, but now I live in New York, but I've also spent time abroad, actually. So I lived in Europe for about 4 years, living in Dublin, London, Berlin, and Prague. And then I actually spent 7 months backpacking through Latin America, also working. It was like a long story. But now I'm back in Brooklyn, where I run an Asian food startup called Omsom. You can check us out at omsom.com. And we are basically really focused on bringing proud, loud Asian flavors into American homes. I've been working on that for about the past 2 years with my sister. She's actually my co-founder. And yeah, feel free to ask me. I'm an open book. So you can ask me about startups, about tech, about venture capital, about food, about NYU, where I went to university. I'm really kind of happy to dig in wherever.
I mean, yeah, I have a lot of questions for you. And if any of you guys have questions, you can either mute yourselves or you can pop it in the chat and I will. But I guess I can get the ball rolling. I guess the first question is, what challenges did you overcome as an Asian American female in not only tech, but also in business and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a whole academic discussion on its own. But I would just say that so I occupy this funny space where I'm Asian. So for a lot of non-Asian folks, I'm seen as part of this monolith that is Asian America, right? And with that comes a lot of privilege, frankly, around being seen as model minority. It's a very double-edged sword, but it's definitely a weird, insidious sort of privilege. And so in many ways, I benefited from that in ways that if I were Black and brown, I probably wouldn't be able to say. But at the same time, I'm Southeast Asian, and I think that's a very necessary differentiation to make, where I do not come from generational wealth. My parents are refugees who came to the US in the early 80s, kind of late 70s. And so I guess so many challenges in the way that a lot of underrepresented minorities face, which is, not having role models that look like me in spaces, or showing up at meetups or events and being the only woman, let alone the only woman of color in the room. Just not being perceived as a leader or worthy of, managing others. And so, yeah, it shows up in a multitude of different ways, and I'm happy to dig into wherever, is helpful for you. But I guess it's manifested itself in a lot of ways that could be really discouraging and are very discouraging, but I try and just keep chugging along. And, the reason why we started this business, my sister and I, is just because we want to show other Asian Americans and other underrepresented minorities all around the world, hopefully, that it doesn't matter. And if anything, we are all stepping back into our power and stepping back into our voices, and that there's something really profound and powerful about that.
I mean, that's definitely inspiring, and your story itself is just very empowering to so many of us. And we have a bunch of questions already. So I guess you can start with the first one from Suveda. What was it like working with your sister for a business?
Yeah, it's not easy, but it's also really amazing, and I can't imagine doing anything else. So just to give you all kind of some background, my sister and I are super different. So Vanessa, that's her name. Vanessa is what I call my parents' American dream. She went to Harvard. She was a management consultant at Bain. She was a track star. and just very much like, you know, all the things that they want in terms of school and grades. Like she got a perfect score in the SAT, very left brain. And then I'm super right brain. Like, I think I've accomplished it a lot, but I've gone about it in like a really kind of all over the place way. I pretty much just fell in love with the internet at a very young age, and that just became like my life. Like I didn't care about school. I didn't care about academics. I was the world's worst student. I pretty much just focused on like building cool internet things, hanging out with internet people, subculture, like that sort of stuff. I'm very much like a creative. And so Vanessa and I are super, super different. I think that sometimes causes tension because we don't think the same way about things. But what that also means though is that like we are very complementary in skill set. So we like can very clearly draw a line around the things that we work on in our business. So she works on, you know, like finance, strategy, ops, you know, product, and I own brand, marketing, and creative, because it's just like the different things that we're good at. So yeah, it's really nice, honestly. Like we're best friends. We're super close. We have so much love and so much trust. But that also means that, you know, sometimes when things are hard, it's very easy to kind of revert into like, you know, like catty sister mode. And we try not to do that, but it does happen.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine, but I'm glad that you guys work out and balance each other really well. That's awesome. So next question from Janavi. I hope I said that right. For high schoolers starting their own business as organizations, what advice do you have for what steps should they take?
Starting your own business or org. Yeah, I guess like without me knowing too many details, I did something like this actually in high school. I started like our like school's literary magazine. I guess the first thing is probably just like one, making sure there's a need for it. So, you know, that's just validating that there's like a market or like a customer or, you know, a community that's excited about what you're excited about. So what that meant for me is that like I went around and actually just like surveyed 100 people and was just like stood in my cafeteria or something. And I was like, hey, is this something you'd be interested in? And basically just started to collect data around, you know, is this something that people want? Could I find people who are interested in either buying or participating, whatever that is? So just as much as you can validate your idea, that's, I think, really important. And then after that, it's just like finding a community of other folks. I think it's really hard to do something on your own, but when you have either like a co-founder or a partner or something like that who can help you, I think that is like really energizing for me. And so when I started OMSOM, like I couldn't do this business alone. I have to do it with Vanessa, my sister. And then eventually we started to hire and just really build out our skill set. We were just really honest with ourselves about like where our gaps are as leaders, and then managed to find folks who could kind of fill in those gaps and build like kind of really like a complementary team. But yeah, that's as far as I think I can give advice until I kind of get more specifics. Sorry, hope that's helpful.
I mean, that definitely is great advice, and especially that part where you talked about, you know, recognizing your strengths and weaknesses as leaders. That's really important for people to understand. So next question from Veda. Any tips on growing a new youth organization dedicated to specifically educating students about tech to a national/international level by recruiting both middle and high school students and benefiting from learning from our camps and recruiting high school students to apply for our leadership positions? That was a big one.
Ooh,
yeah,
that's a easy one. Again, without me knowing a ton of specifics, any tips on growing? So I guess I can talk a little bit about what I did at Tech at NYU. Maybe that would be helpful. So Tech at NYU was is New York City's largest student developer and designer organization. So it started out as like a small org of maybe like 10 students at like the specific school I was at NYU. And by the time that I left, it became this like multi-university coalition, not just at NYU, but also at Columbia, Fordham, Cooper Union, SUNY. And how we did that was we basically, we started doing a lot of like outreach efforts. So we did like a lot of hackathons, but instead of just keeping it to NYU, we like would email kind of similar organizations at other universities and be like, hey, do you want to collab and come to this hackathon? Like pizza's on us. You can bring as many people as you want, but we really just want to encourage and foster like inter-university collaboration. And then like once that sort of like organic community started forming where folks were meeting each other at these hackathons, then it became much easier to then recruit executive board members. So actually by the time that I graduated, my e-board was not just NYU at all. It was actually like a complete mix of students who were willing to travel to, downtown Manhattan to be able to attend these meetings. I would say a big driver in that is that we found advisors outside of our school. And what that did was that it communicated a certain level of like credibility and like legitness, in the sense that it wasn't just like, oh, the advisors are all these professors, all these CS professors at this university, but instead we got like venture capitalists, we got founders, we got like some, tech figures in the community who weren't associated with a particular university, but instead were just like, notable figures in and of themselves. And that just made it much easier for us to be able to pitch these other schools. Because the last thing that those other schools wanted was to like join an NYU thing when they're like, hey, we go to Fordham, like this doesn't make sense. But we were able to show through our e-board and through the advisors that we have, that we had larger ambitions. And I think people just want to be part of something that they think is bigger than just them or just their university. So yeah, I'm not sure what that looks like in terms of reaching middle and high school students. Like I don't know the barriers there. There's always, of course, this like top down thing where you go in through teachers and administrative folks. But I actually think it's probably like going ground up. Like, I don't know if that's like getting on TikTok and finding out, I don't know. But it's probably in a more like grassroots way, if I had to guess, like finding where those folks are hanging out and getting them excited about what you're doing. Sorry, that was a little bit long-winded. Hope it's helpful.
I'm sure it was. Yeah, so this is more of a fun question on someone's part. Daniela asks, what is something you would say to your younger self?
Ooh. Can I swear? Is that not allowed? I won't. Okay.
To be honest, I don't know. So if you make
I guess I would say is like, don't give a damn. I replace it with a less bad. Don't give a damn about what others think. I think, and I mean this in many ways. So I'm the first of my family to go through American high school. So I think my parents like really didn't know how to prepare me. They've never been through like American high school before. And in general, like I've just been a bit of an outsider for a while, like, and I'm happy with that. And I love that. But when I was younger, I like was like, oh shoot, like I have to like kind of fit in, or I have to do things the right way. And like, look, all these folks are like doing college this way and they're studying this, and then they're going on this path. And I just kind of wish that I had embraced earlier on in my life that like, it doesn't matter. And like, just because other people do it doesn't mean you should. I think all the best things in my life have come from taking big bets where people were like, this is insane what you're doing. So for example, like I started working for startups when I was 16. All of my friends were working for like the local coffee shop, or working at their dad's like pool company, and they were making good money. But I found like an internship at the startup with a company no one had ever heard of, but that was like the best decision I ever made, because it helped me fall in love with technology and the internet in a very real way, and showed me the possibility of what I could do with my career and with my life. And I just wish that like I took that same energy like earlier. So yeah, just don't give a damn what people think. Like you're going to find your own path for yourself, and just have conviction in that. A lot of people will try and tell you that you're wrong or that you're crazy, but yeah, I wish I just trusted myself more on that.
Amen to that. For sure. So what would you what's your motivation to overcome difficulties and stress, especially during the college application season?
Ooh, that's real. So I'm probably not going to be of the most help here, because I had pretty much just one university that I wanted to apply to. I only applied to 6 universities. My sister applied to 12, I think. And I think by the time I was like a senior in high school, or junior, I guess, I just kind of had this belief that like the universe has my back. Like, not to sound like hippy dippy, but I was like, like I've done the work. And at this point, there's nothing really I can stress out about now, right? And I just kind of have trust that like the universe will give me the thing that I'm meant to be doing. And so that motivation, yeah, it wasn't really motivation. It was more just like, I've done a lot. I've done all of the good work. I've done all the things that I can. And at this point, I'm just kind of like waiting to see what makes sense. And I'm one of those believers that, like, call it karma, call it God, call it whatever, that I do believe that you're going to get what is going to transform and get you where you need to be. So yeah, that's kind of like a hippy dippy answer there. I guess, like, in terms of overcoming difficulties or stress, like, I spoke to a lot of older, like, college freshmen and college sophomores, and they kind of like reframed a lot of my stress. Like, I think when you talk to folks who are like, oh my God, it wasn't even a big deal. Like, the college interview isn't even a thing. Like, don't worry about it. Or even folks who, like, got to college, hated it, and then transferred. They're like, it's fine. Like, you're going to be fine. Even if you end up in the wrong place, you don't get into the college that you want, like, it'll be fine. You're going to end up where you're going to end up. So that really helped me too, was speaking to older folks who have been through the process. Because sometimes, like, your friends are kind of helpful, but they're also super stressed out, and then you all end up in this, like, stress tornado. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely guidance, mentorship, all that stuff. Very,
Yeah.
very. So yeah. So I don't know what a B2B business is, but how would you, from Dia, how would you go about starting a B2B business in comparison to a B2C?
Right. So just for everyone on the call, if you don't know what that is, a B2B business is basically a business to business where businesses sell to each other, whereas B2C is business to consumer. So I run actually a B2C business where we sell directly to consumers. Again, without knowing specifics and context, B2B is really, really different. I would say the number one thing is probably validating your market size. A lot of B2B businesses are focused. They're like, oh, we know exactly what our problem is, and we know exactly, like, the software to build for it. But haven't gone the, several steps forward of just understanding, like, how large is this market? Like, if we captured even, let's say, 5% of this specific market, that it would look like this, and we would need to build this team and raise this money to get there. I think that's probably the biggest thing I see. I don't know as much about B2B businesses, so sorry, I can't be as helpful there. But again, I imagine it's the same as every other business. Validate the market, understand who your consumers are, understand what their option set currently is, and how you would potentially differentiate remarkably so above the others.
Well, I learned something new today. That's great. Next question from Chow, I think. Please forgive me if I botched that name. I just don't know. But do you have any advice for high school students to find their true passion, especially when they're still confused about it?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I have lots of advice, but the main thing I would say is that you have so much time. Like, I got very lucky. Like, when I found my, not true passion, but I found, like, a step towards my true passion at 16. But, like, you have forever to do it. Like, some of the best companies in the world weren't started until people were 40, and they found their passion, like, after, having kids. Like, I love that you're already thinking about this, but just know that your high school, early 20s, mid 20s, I would even say late 20s are for exploration. So instead of focusing on, like, all right, what's the thing, right? Just go and try everything. That's what I did. So I knew I liked startups, but startups is a gigantic field, right? Like, you could start a B2B startup, you could start a B2C startup, you could invest in startups, you could advise startups, you could, it's a huge field. So what I did, knowing that I broadly liked this amorphous area, I went and tried to do intern or learn from everything in that area. So when I got to college, right away, freshman year, I started interning for startups. And every single semester, I interned at a different startup, because I knew, I was like, I want to learn more about startups. What better way? It's like, I personally am not an academic person. I can't learn shit like sitting in a classroom. So I instead just focused on, okay, cool. Like, I know I'm not going to be a developer, so I'm going to learn about everything non-technical about startups. So I interned in an ops role. I interned in a social media role. I interned in a sales role. I interned in a finance role. I basically just wanted to explore as much as possible. And eventually, over time, by trying all these things, meeting all these different people, having all these conversations, I began to kind of, like, whittle down slowly but surely, like, the things that I got excited about. And that's how I ended up where I am today, which is through time working at all these startups. Then I worked in venture capital, which is investing in startups. I quickly realized, like, you know what? I don't like B2B. I really like consumers. I love the idea of building community and brand, and I love food, and I'm really passionate about social justice and identity, and all of that kind of ended up with me starting OMSOM. But that took time. I'm 28 now, but like, I was interning up until 21, and then I was living abroad for 4 years, like working in venture capital. Like, you're not going to silver bullet. There's no way to silver bullet to your passion. So I just really would advise you to like forgive yourself, love yourself, and give yourself room and space to just explore and make mistakes and like find yourself through that. So yeah.
That's some fantastic advice. A lot of times we're like zooming to the future and we're like, no, sit down. So yeah, I mean, you talked about OMSOM, and so Marissa asks, what is something you would have done differently while starting or running OMSOM?
First off, just want to say it's called OMSOM, but I will say what you did was you actually pronounced it the Vietnamese way, which is the origin of the word. So like, props as well, girl. So yeah, what is something I would have done differently while starting or running OMSOM? This is a hard question because I'm so happy with where we're at. I guess, I know. I would have started reaching out to mentors way earlier. Everyone says that. Everyone, their mothers is like, mentors are important. But they are. We started the company, we're doing super well, like all this press is writing about us. And now I'm coming to a point where I'm like, oh shoot, I really wish I learned more about retention marketing. But it's almost not too late. We're only 2 months old, but I'm kind of like, I would have saved a lot of time and energy had I just started this learning maybe like 3 months ago, reaching out to folks and asking them for other CMOs. And so, yeah, I wish I had reached out to mentors earlier and just kind of, not thought about my ego in some ways. I was like, I don't need a mentor. I'm really smart. And, no one can build anything on their own. So yeah, reach out to mentors earlier.
Yeah, that's great advice. So Dia asks, what is one thing that made you fall in love with NYU?
Not the school. I love NYU. I love NYU because of the context it gave me, in the sense that I was living in New York City. I was 17 years old. I had the access to one of the greatest technology ecosystems in the US. And I had like a pretty decent credibility stamp of like student at NYU. But really the thing that made me fall in love is New York City, is just having access to literally anyone you could possibly want. Like many of the brightest founders in the US right now, so many bright investors, so many meetups, all these like kind of thought leaders I had access to as a 17 and 18-year-old. And I just thought that was insane. But I think you can still have that same access now without even being in New York City because of quarantine. Like anyone and everyone, you tweet them, you send them a DM on Insta, like you can probably get access to pick their brain for 15 minutes. So I don't think you need to pay a school $60,000 a year for that, which is what I did.
I mean, that's awesome that the NYU is a great place to live, but yeah. And so Anna, I think she's talking about specifically like the don't give a damn about anybody, what anyone thinks of you. So she was like, that's so empowering. How do you suggest getting into that mindset of like, not caring about anything or about other people's opinion of you, and then learning how to ignore other people's opinions?
Yeah, that's really real. I don't know how I did it. Part of me thinks I was born that way. But I think like anything, it's like a muscle. Like you just have to keep building it. At first, it's going to feel super painful and unnatural. And then over time, you're just going to like get into a habit of being like, water off a duck's back. I think it's finding your tribe is another thing, is like finding other folks who you admire or you perhaps think this way, and just ask them questions of like, why do you think that? Like, what gave you that strength? I would say something that a lot of me and like my friends and I struggle with is around feeling whole and enough as individuals. Like society, mainstream media, a lot of like the messages we receive, particularly as women, are that like we're not enough physically, mentally, emotionally, career-wise, and like you as you are as an individual, and I tell myself this like literally every day, like I am enough. Just because I don't know these things or I'm not good at these things doesn't mean that there's anything wrong or missing with me. It just means that I have to, talk to other folks to either learn or work with other people who can help fill in those gaps. Like you are enough as you are. And that took me a really, really long time to learn. And I'm still learning it. I'm 28 years old. I'm still learning it. So yeah.
That's real. That's real.
Mhm.
Yeah. Another very real question that a lot of us face is from Daniela. Does it matter what college you go to? And then to you, I think, what are your hopes for the future?
Oh, great question. You're going to hear like a lot of different answers on this. My personal belief is that it does not matter what college you go to. I think the university that I went to, I'm very thankful for in the sense that I was put into a context and in an environment where I got to meet other ambitious, like-minded people, but I don't think I needed NYU for that. I actually think that if you are proactive enough, if you kind of put yourself out there enough, you kind of are fearless enough, anyone could replicate what I did at NYU from any university, any town, like in the world. Like my previous partner, he didn't go to university at all, and now he's running like $100 million startup, right? Like it. I think the way the world works and how we value knowledge is changing, and that doesn't mean it only has to be through a university. However, going to any university is a way for a lot of folks to kind of like just kind of get a stamp on the resume. And if you think that's important to you, and if that would give you kind of like the mind share and the headspace to be able to eventually take risks down the road, then do what you got to do. I'm not sitting here to tell you to like drop out of college, drop out of high school, like go build a startup, be next Mark Zuckerberg. I think that's bullshit. And I think that's something that a lot of white men with privilege tell you to do. Of course, it's easy to not have a college degree if your family has a ton of money and can like bankroll you, right? But like, that's not the case for everybody. So I would just say it's all about your own kind of personal risk level. I personally think for me, NYU was nice, but I'm not sure it was worth the money. And I think I could have learned everything that I did learn without going to that university. Like I would have just sat on Twitter, DM'd all of these folks, taken a ton of coffee meetings, showed up at meetups, interned still, shadowed founders. Like I could have done all of that without a degree, but I think having the NYU stamp did help accelerate it a little bit. Sorry, hopefully that's helpful.
That definitely is, and it's a very important message. So, I mean, thank you.
Yeah.
So someone asked, how do you find the connection between technology and food? Which is a good question. Did your parents oppose your food startup idea at first? If yes, how did you convince them?
Okay, two very good questions. The connection between technology and food. Yeah, so this is a tough question and there's no right answer. Food is ultimately a reflection of culture and narratives, and that's why I love food. Like food, yes, functional, keeps you alive, you eat it and you stay alive, great. But the piece about that's really interesting, I know like as a Vietnamese first gen, is that it's a carrier of stories and of identity, and for a lot of first and second gen Americans is a way for us to re-engage with our culture and with our identities, even if sometimes like we don't speak the language or we don't live at home anymore. It's just like it means something really important. And I would say that's probably the same for everyone. Everyone has like nostalgia or memories or family kind of identity wrapped in food. And I think like that, all of those things, technology also accelerates. And so we think about it, and I guess I'm not talking about technology in terms of like agricultural innovation or, innovation in machinery and kind of like that side of food. I think that's really valid and very real and very exciting, but not anything I know about. So I can't tell you about like how to grow hydroponic plants. But what I can say is that we have found with OMSOM that our community uses technology to connect over food. And if you like, and if you look at our audience, us as a generation over-index in terms of sharing and discovery about food online. So we use Instagram, we use TikTok, we use Twitter, whatever that is, to like discover restaurants, discover chefs, discover dishes. And I think that's really interesting that like there's that intersection. Yeah, that's all I can really kind of say there. And then the second question, did my parents oppose my startup idea? They did not. They're super chill. Actually, that's not true. They're really chill when it comes to me. I think over time I have gotten them accustomed to Kim being a weirdo, that they're like, we trust Kim. We don't really understand her, but we trust her. And so when I came around to them and I was like, hey, like I'm starting this thing, they're like, very cool. I think when my sister said the same thing, even though we're working in the same company, they're like, oh, Vanessa, are you going to be able to handle this risk? Will you be able to handle the stress? That was a little bit different, but yeah, they're really chill. I think over time they have built trust and understanding for my decision making. Even if they don't understand, I think I've just drawn a line with them of just like, look, I know myself best. You came to this country to give me opportunity. And I think this is like part like the earliest entrepreneurs were immigrants. And so I think just tying that back to them for them of just like, hey, I'm doing something kind of crazy, but that's like why you came to this country, is for me to be able to do something like that. So yeah, they're supportive. I don't think they fully understand what we're doing, but they're definitely supportive.
That's great. I mean, I'm glad. And I mean, if they trust you, I mean, sorry, my brain. That's totally great. Yeah. So Daniela asks, how has quarantine affected your mental health and your business?
That's a great question. And thank you for asking about mental health. I think it's something that doesn't get discussed as often and as much as it should be. So I'll tackle the business question first. We are an at-home cooking product. So actually quarantine, I don't ever want to say there's a silver lining to COVID because it's a global trauma and pandemic that we're going through. But what I will say is that for a lot of communities, we are kind of rediscovering the joy around cooking again. Like a lot of folks who only ever ate takeout or restaurants or, heat up meals are now tasked with cooking for themselves. And I think a lot of folks are getting bored of the same routine. And so OMSOM is like a really good way to kind of shake that up and also introduce for a lot of folks flavors that they miss from home or flavors that they miss from eating out at restaurants. And so in that sense, it's kind of been positive, I guess, for our business. I don't want to say that, but it was like a weirdly opportune time for us to launch. Like we didn't plan it. Like obviously we weren't like waiting around for a pandemic. We had just planned to launch in May. And then, obviously everything happened and we were so nervous. We were like, should we launch? Like, do people even want to spend money? Do people even want to think about discovering a new brand? But ultimately we just decided to launch because we were like, I think people need something fun to look forward to in their homes that can also perhaps like bring back memories of home or bring back memories of like a really lovely meal that they had with their friends. And so, yeah, in that way, quarantine has been good for our business. In terms of my mental health, I think it was really tough in the beginning. Just when like we didn't know what was happening and like my entire team was really stressed out, really on edge. And that's still happening for sure. But now I think I've gotten a little bit better about just taking care of myself. I live alone in Brooklyn, so I'm just starting to do things like I used to just wake up like 10 minutes before work and then like roll out of bed and like, just start working. Now I wake up an hour before, I make myself tea. I just kind of like get ready for the day, just building in more like moments for self-care. But yeah, it's not easy and no one is expected to be okay during these times because it's a global pandemic. So if anyone says they're like, I'm doing great, like I'm the fittest and healthiest version of myself, they're lying. Because yeah, I don't know, not for me.
That's true. Yeah, I guess the next question kind of feeds into the like, starting the business, like in the period. How did you get people to believe in yourself, and in your products/business?
Oh my gosh. I have no idea. I wish I could say there was like this, silver bullet way to do it. I guess like the reason people believed in me when I was younger wasn't so much that I had all the skills or that I had all the answers, but it was that I came prepared. That really freaking helps. So like anytime I had a meeting, I didn't just show up and expect them to just tell me stuff. I showed up having looked at their LinkedIn, having already prepared a set of questions based on their experience. I looked at their Twitter feed and looked at the articles that they were reading and like dove down into like what they commented on them. I like did research into their companies or into their investment firms and just came prepared with exactly what I wanted from them. I think in the beginning I didn't do that, and people would just be like, hey, I'm here to help you, but I'm not going to do the work, right? And I was just expecting them to just like give me knowledge when I realized it was my job to pull knowledge from them. And so I think I didn't have all the answers, but I had all the right questions. And that really helped people believe in me, or at least like be like, oh shit, she's smart. Like she's on top of it. In terms of believing in my product and business, I mean, that's nearly like a separate college course I could give around entrepreneurship and how to think about building a business. But broadly, I would say three things: product, market, team, right? I thought about a product. We did a ton of market validation to understand, do consumers want this? How much would they pay for it? What is the competitive set? On the market, I thought about, okay, from like a very macro standpoint, is this a market where, you know, there is room for a solution like this? People are open to a solution like this, and could I build it myself with like the right team? And then founder or team piece is just making sure that between myself, my co-founder, and the rest of my team, we have like strong skill sets that are specific to this domain or, you know, industry. So yeah, product, market, team is like the three things you need to make sure you get right for that piece.
That's fantastic advice. Both of the things, but yeah. So Daniela asks, have you had any memorable experiences in New York?
Oh my God, so many. So many. Trying to keep it PG, but I will say one time my friend made out with Drake at a club. That was hilarious. This was like when he was like real cool. He was like on the up and up. But yeah, this was my sophomore year or something. We were like at a Halloween party, and then she came back. She's like, I just made out with Drake. Anyways, I thought that was hilarious.
I mean, that definitely is insane. That's definitely a story she will tell, I bet. But yeah. Dia says, just wanted to say I love your website and the whole color scheme and vibe. Me too.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, we just wanted to do something really different and show like this proud and loud energy. So hope that translated to the site.
Yeah, it totally did. But yeah. Tao asks, how did you reach out to startups for internships as a high school student? Do you have any advice for students who don't have a specific talent / skill when applying to internship, like coding, designing, etc.?
Oh my God, yes. Okay. So I'll just tell you my story. So I was 16. I didn't have any skills. Like I wasn't a developer or coder. And I literally, at the time, I actually wanted to be a journalist. And so had sent out my resume. It was like 2 lines. I sent out my resume to a ton of like magazines and publications in Boston where I grew up. And the ones that got back to me were like, you're 16, you have no skills. Why are you emailing us? However, what I had done was that actually, I don't know if people are listening anymore, but I had gone on under like Help Wanted and just all these like tiny startups, like 2, 3, 4, 5 people large. And what I pitched was like, hey, look, I don't have any specific skills, but I'm a fast learner. I know how to use the internet and I'm willing to get scrappy. Like, let me come in. You don't have to pay me, or you can pay me very little, but I will just come in and be a Swiss Army knife for whatever you need me to do. No task is too small. And I think, because, you know, at that age, like you don't probably have any like hard skills that they might need, but every single startup, including my own, like any startup right now, is looking just for someone who can touch all the different parts of their business. And it could be like menial stuff sometimes where you're not running coffee because that's not a thing in COVID, but maybe you're like exporting emails and like crawling through and finding, you know, like fake emails, or you're sitting on Instagram doing research on influencers they can reach out to, or you're, you know, sitting on LinkedIn trying to find people they could potentially hire. Like there's so many of those like little everyday things that are super helpful for a startup, but when you're 3 or 4 or 5 people, you know, big, you don't have anyone to dedicate their mind share towards. Just pitch people on that of like, I'm willing to be a Swiss Army knife, whatever you need, I can get it done. And if I can't get it done, I'll find a way to get it done, whether like, you know, paying someone or, you know, whatever that is. And that was how I got my first startup job. They were like, the CEO wrote me back and he was like, all right, so you don't really have any skills, but we need someone to call like these 20 businesses a day and ask them about their social media needs. And so I did that. And like, I didn't know anything. And I was freaking 16, just picking up the phone and being like, hi, like I work for the startup. We create social media profiles for small businesses who aren't technically savvy. Like, do you need any help there? And that's how I got my job. And then over time, you know, I started building enough skill sets, and then I could kind of level up on my job. But yeah, just basically, you don't need to pitch them on anything, but your scrappiness, your can-do attitude, and your ability to kind of just like get shit done. Yeah.
That's totally awesome. Like, wow. But yeah, so Daniela asks, have you ever had any fake/toxic friends or coworkers, and how did you manage that?
Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm the person to take advice on this because I'm actually pretty like non-confrontational. But if I could give advice to myself on some of this stuff, I've had like toxic friends and I kind of just wish I cut them out of my life earlier. Wait, sorry. I wish I had a really direct conversation with them first because everyone deserves a chance. Like you don't know, hurt people. You don't know what they're going through. But I just kind of wished I had confronted someone and been like, hey, like your energy is weird. And like, I kind of felt hurt or shame when you did these things, like what's up? And then after a while, like after you tell them that and they don't fix it, then like, I kind of wish I just cut them. In terms of coworkers, I've unfortunately never had a bad coworker. So yeah, I can't speak on that. Sorry.
Yeah, for sure. Great advice. Yeah. So, what are some Yale asks, what are some factors to consider when selecting team members for startups, projects, etc.?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would say first is culture fit. Like I know people will probably tell you to optimize for like the skill set that you need. And to some extent, maybe that's true, but actually like culture fit. So for example, when we were hiring our marketing director, we saw I interviewed so many people. And there were a handful of folks that I was like, oh my gosh, they're super bright. Like they went to this Ivy League college, da 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 da. But when you're starting something hard from the ground up, you really need to make sure that like you can spend every second with this person and that they can be like a friend to you, or if not a friend, like at least a trusted ass person. And ultimately, like I literally, we spoke to maybe 50 people and I got on maybe a 30-minute call with the woman who is now my marketing director. And immediately, like I knew in my gut, I was like, she's the one. Like vibes were good. She's super intelligent. But on top of that, like she's really human and empathetic and funny and bright. And I want to spend my time with her and I want to be a friend. And then my sister was like, yeah, but like the school she went to is just okay. And like, she doesn't have the perfect experience, but I like something in my gut knew. And then over time, we actually ended up hiring her. And so I think optimizing first for culture fit, and then second is probably relevant experience for the role and domain expertise. But yeah, culture fit first, like you're going to go through some hard times together because starting anything new inevitably is going to be really, really freaking difficult. So yeah, that's my first advice.
For sure. I think that's fantastic advice too. A lot of times we optimize on skills and then we actually like the people. So it's everyone take that into account. But yeah. So Kara says, I've been given a lot of advice on how you need a story, a why, or some sort of North Star that shows through in your interviews, resume in order to get jobs, internships. What's your advice on figuring out that at such a young age?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is true. You need a story, something that you can craft for yourself. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you do need a story. What I will say though, is that the story can be, I'm exploring everything. Like that was the story I told. So I basically knew, I was like, I know I like early stage companies. I like startups, but that's so broad and vague. But then the story that I told was that I know that I love startups, but I don't know where I want to work. So I'm going to try all of the things to de-risk. People love that shit. People love that word. To de-risk my like career. And that's basically just like a fancy way of saying like, I'm trying all the things so that I can find out what I love. And I think that's a strong story in and of itself. In terms of, yeah, like figuring that out at such a young age. And I said this earlier, I would try and just like remove, I know it's really easier to say than done, remove some of that pressure around like having a super tight story, having like this North Star figured out, because I didn't figure that out probably until like my mid 20s. And I even think that's early for some folks. Like the best thing you can do for yourself right now is to explore all of the things. Cause that's your way of like crossing off a checklist, right? It is like, I did this thing. I did sales and I was like, nope, not for me, cross. But then I was able to tell the story of like, I tried sales because I knew I wasn't technical and I knew I wanted to learn about all the non-technical things that you could do at a startup, and sales just wasn't it for me. So now I'm focusing on social media. Now I'm focusing on ops. Now I'm focusing on community, whatever that is. The story doesn't have to be perfect, just as long as you can clearly communicate why you did each of those things is how I think about it.
Daniela asks, did you ever feel like you were missing out on something fun that others were doing while you were busy working on your business?
In the beginning, yes, but that's the trade-off. Like when you become a founder, like this is your life. And I knew that going into it because I'd been around a lot of founders and startups. Now, not so much because no one's doing anything. It's a great time to not have FOMO because no one's leaving the house. Sorry. Wish that was a better answer.
That's true. So Andrea says, I saw you were under Forbes 30 under 30. Congrats. What does that mean and what's the process to become one?
Thank you so much. It was really an incredible opportunity. But what I will tell you, and I think others will echo this, is that a lot of these like industry awards and accolades are bullshit. I'm really happy and incredibly honored that I was selected as Forbes 30 under 30. What people don't really tell you is that the selection process for a lot of these things, I'm not speaking specifically about Forbes, but just for a lot of these things, a lot of them are rigged in the sense of like, it's the judge's like friend of a friend, right? And so in many ways you have to kind of be in the scene or in the network. And I think naturally, if you're an underrepresented minority like myself, you're not like, chances are you're compared to like perhaps like non-underrepresented minorities who are already naturally in those networks, like it becomes easier for them to get it. So I would just say like, definitely cool, definitely opened a lot of doors. I don't really hang my hat on it. I think there are a lot of other things that I've done that are, more reflective of my journey and of the hard work that I've done. But yeah, like it's cool. Like I get, I'm in this network now of other kind of smart young folks, and I'm invited to these events, and, investors look twice at my profile. But I would say there's so many other things that I'm much, much more proud of. But in terms of the process, yeah, it's opaque, and it's opaque for a reason. A lot of the time there's like a nomination process where someone who used to be a Forbes 30 under 30 person, or, got it in the past, would nominate you. Then it goes to this judging kind of selection process. There's maybe an interview, and then you're selected. But again, it's super opaque. And I think that opacity lends itself to a lot of, the same folks in the same networks getting awarded it. So yeah, just take it all with a grain of salt.
True. Great advice. So Kara asks, sorry, my brain blanked. Omsom looking for interns, and then so much love for you, Vanessa, and your brand.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. We are not actively looking for interns, but that's only because we haven't had the bandwidth to really think about it. However, if there is like something you want to work on or something that you think you can bring to the team, please email us, phamsisters@omsom.com. We are very opportunistic. Like we just kind of take a look at everyone as they come in individually. And if, you pitch like a cool gig, and this is actually, I guess this is advice for, I would say, any company or startup. A lot of the times these companies are so small and so under-resourced that they don't even have time to like put together a job spec. And so what I would do sometimes is I would go on their team page, I would think about their business and be like, so for example, I pitched this dating app, back when I was in college. I was like, hey, like I'm looking at your team, you have a ton of developers, that's great. And like you're building a really beautiful mobile app. However, you don't have anyone really on the ops side who is thinking about partnerships with local businesses around how you could bring, perhaps couples who are on dates, you could maybe give them like a discounted drink that would drive traffic to this business. And I essentially kind of like pitched a job that didn't exist. And because these founders don't have time to think, like they read that email and they're like, oh, she's already done all of this thinking. She's already identified, you know, the handful of businesses that I need to talk to, and actually sent me a couple ideas. You know, even if they don't end up pursuing that idea, it shows that you're thinking a couple steps ahead. So my advice is just like pitch your job that you want. You could be like, hey, like, so you need some more graphic design, like your social media is jank. Like, I'm great at InDesign, like, you know, like just pitch it. And I think that's way better than being like, are you looking for an intern? And then kind of not really knowing, because then it becomes so much easier for a startup to be like, hey, we're not looking for one. And, you know, the door's closed, as opposed to pitching something and then being like, yeah, actually we need that.
That's fantastic advice. Yeah. So Tao asks, was the college application process a roller coaster ride for you? Is there anything you wish you'd done differently?
Oh my gosh. I'm like the worst person to ask about college stuff. I'm sorry, y'all. It was not a roller coaster ride because I just knew I had one university. And unfortunately, NYU was the last one that I heard back from. No, it wasn't. I just I had like a bit of delusion, which has served me well in life, where I love risk and I'm just like, if I don't get into anything, like I'll figure it out. Like I just have this like, I'll figure it out attitude. So yeah, unfortunately it really wasn't a roller coaster ride. I was nervous. I was waiting to hear back from NYU because that was my dream school. But other than that, I got into every school that I applied for except for one, and it was Columbia. So I was like Ivy League, fair enough. But yeah, it wasn't really, sorry. But is there anything I wish I would have done differently? I think maybe I would have applied to maybe one or two more universities just to give myself optionality. But looking back, I didn't need to because I ended up at the school that I think I wanted to go to. So yeah, optionality, but not too much optionality that creates work for you. Yeah, sorry. Wish that was more helpful.
True. I have a question for myself.
Yeah.
So how did you get do you have any tips for getting like publicity for your business or for yourself or whatever that you do?
Yeah, so PR is like its own freaking nightmare. You could, if you have a lot of money, drop money on a publicist, which is a lot of money. The way that I think of like DIYing it is literally just getting in touch with journalists before you ever need them. So what I would do is I would sit on Twitter and follow all the journalists who covered my beat. So, you know, for us, it was like food and consumer. And what I would do is just like follow them literally months or years in advance, and just like start, you know, replying to some of their stuff. Maybe I follow them on Instagram. Maybe I would share their articles and tag them. Maybe I would comment on it. But basically I just started building like an online rapport with them where they got to feel me out as like an individual. And then as OmSom started and as OmSom started getting closer to launch, then I kind of just would, you know, slide into the DMs. They know my name. Maybe we've interacted before in the DMs. Maybe they've replied to my comments. And I just be like, hey, like, this is not a hard pitch. Literally just like would love to get your feedback. And I sent them product. And that converted really, really well. Because I wasn't just some like desperate rando pitching them. I had built this like rapport long-term. This is a lot of work. And also is a very, very long game, but I think that's the best way, is to build relationships directly with journalists. If you can't afford to hire a, you know, fancy PR with their Rolodex, literally you can just do it for free. Just take some time on Twitter or Instagram and just kind of like, make sure you do your research. Obviously don't spam every journalist. Make sure you cover, you know, find the ones that cover your beat. And then, yeah, just start, you know, playing the long game, sending them emails. Like I literally used to email journalists and be like, hey, this is such a great article. Like I sent this to my, my cousin who's running, you know, a broccoli farm and thought this would be interesting to her. And like, literally that ended up being, you know, one of our pieces. So just long game.
I mean, I'm definitely going to use that advice. It is a nightmare for sure. But yeah, thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
So back to the audience questions. Who is your inspiration and why?
Oh my gosh, that's so hard. I don't have like one person that I'm like, I want to be you when I grow up, because I think when you do that, everyone disappoints you. But there are people that I really deeply admire and who I like want to be more like. So the first person is my sister. She's younger than me, so it's kind of crazy I'm saying this, and don't tell her I said this. But I just, I just love the way that she views the world. I want to be empathetic. I want to be an empathetic leader like her. She's really redefining the way I think about business, in the sense, like business leadership. Like, I think a lot of leaders nowadays are rooted in a place of scarcity, where they're like, there's only so much of the pie, so whatever you got, like, take it and take more and take from others, and everyone's competition. And she just comes from such a place of like, it's not, winner take all. We can all build together and build a better future. And I think particularly as women of color, that is like something that sometimes we like have within ourselves of like, oh no, like there can only be one of me in a room. And so if others like me come along, then they are competition. And she just really reframes it as like, the more of us in the room, the better all of our worlds are. And I just really appreciate that. Yeah. So I deeply admire her. I love Michelle Obama. Read her book. I don't really like follow celebrities well. Padma Lakshmi is incredible. I love her form of activism, and I just love how real she keeps it. Chrissy Teigen to some extent, like I think I love her like zero fucks, like this is who I am, take me as I am, like approach. I really admire that. But yeah, like I don't have like business leaders that I look up to, because frankly, a lot of those business leaders are like not good people, as we're seeing through a lot of the exposés and stuff. So yeah, sorry.
That's true. That's true. So I know we're supposed to end at 7, but have a great time. Do you want to answer? Are you willing to answer the rest of
Yeah,
the
of
questions?
course. Yeah. I'm in no rush. I eventually just have to go eat dinner, but like no rush.
Okay. So, Chow asks, how did you find out about small startups? Did you think social media, LinkedIn, whatever?
Yeah. Definitely on Twitter. I just started following a ton of founders, and founders tweet about each other. So like started kind of seeing through the grapevine. Craigslist was really big in my day. I don't know if it's still like a thing anymore, but I used to look on all like the help wanted, like it would be all these like small companies looking for like interns, office managers, admin, summer associates, whatever. And then I started, LinkedIn wasn't super helpful for me, but I would say like following like startup newsletters was really helpful. So for example, gosh, what did I used to subscribe to? There used to be like all of these blogs and newsletters that would share like startup news. Obviously TechCrunch is like a great place to start, but TechCrunch, even then the companies aren't super small. They're quite large by then. I go on a lot of Substacks that share kind of startup news. So there are a ton that are specific to D2C and CPG, which is like the industry I work in, but just find the Substacks for your industry, and I'm sure you'll be able to like to find a ton of startups. AngelList is actually super helpful. AngelList has a really great search function where you can search like in what cities, in what industries, and what jobs are they looking for, and they'll spit out like a big list. So start there. Like find Substacks, AngelList, and Twitter.
Yeah, that's great advice. So Savannah says, actually, I love how humble and genuine you are. You're so inspiring. So
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I don't know shit. None of us know shit. So I'm just trying to like give you all kind of my experience and be as real as possible, because I wish people were like that with me. So thank you.
I love real people. But yeah, so that sounds weird. But yeah. So Andrea says, entrepreneurship versus grad school versus corporate after college? Question mark.
Yeah. I can't speak for you without knowing your career goals or what you're trying to learn. I can only speak for my decision framework. So as I was graduating college, I was 21, and around then I had known through college and through internships that like I love startups. Like I love taking companies from 0 to 1 as opposed to 1 to 100. So that's awesome. I love startups. I love tech. I love the internet. And I broadly, vaguely knew that I wanted to start my own company. I didn't know when, I didn't know how, I didn't know where, I didn't know in what industry, but I broadly knew that like somewhere in the future, I want to start a company. And so as I was looking at my option set, graduating college, there were a couple options, and they're very similar to kind of the three that you said there, although grad school was never on the table for me. Fuck academics, I could never do it. But I was looking at like, okay, I could go join like a big tech company, like a Google or Facebook or Apple or Twitter. Okay, that's interesting. I could go work at a startup, like a small one, or I could go into venture capital. Those were pretty much the three options for me. Knowing 21-year-old Kim was like, okay, if I want to go start a company, Google, Facebook, or Twitter won't really be helpful. Like they'll help me save up a lot of money because they pay well, but like the skill sets that I'm learning there are very, very specialized. And when you're a founder, you kind of need to know how to do all of the things. And so me knowing ad sales in the Germany region is actually not going to be helpful unless I want to create an ad product for the Germany region. So I was like, okay, corporate, not for me. I also just have never thrived well in really rigid, structured places. And I really like startups. I've never worked for a company larger than 20 people. So corporate was pretty much thrown off right away. So then my options were either go work in a startup or go work in venture capital. I ended up choosing venture capital mostly because my bet was that by working in venture capital, I could see what successful companies look like, because we would, as a VC, what you do is you invest in startups and you invest in hopefully successful startups. So I was like, okay, cool. You know what? That will give me a really macro overview of what it's like to be a founder. Like I'll be working with founders every day. I'll be seeing like the mistakes that they make. I'll be seeing the wins that they have and how they got there. Like that was my way, again, fun story part of de-risking my own startup down the road. So that was the decision that I made. But basically, if you can, as much as possible, try and figure out what you're trying to learn or achieve and then optimizing for that. I wouldn't worry about names or labels or even frankly titles. My title varied greatly at different startups. Like I was head of down to intern to associate, because startups, like, titles don't mean anything. I would really optimize for what you're learning for and then go for your opportunities based on that.
Yeah, that's awesome advice for sure. So Annie asks, are there any books or thinkers in the startup/VC world that you would follow closely/recommend?
I'm not like a book person. I do most of my reading on Twitter. I like kind of small, snippets of people to read from. It really depends on your industry. So for example, I have a deep and long list of like consumer/food/ direct to consumer startup founders to follow, but that might not be relevant if that's not what you're going to go into. I would say like a good starting place is just look at investors first, because then you could see the sort of companies they invest in and then follow the founders that they talk about. Like just kind of start really high level and broad. So like, the Mark Susters, the Fred Wilsons, the Kristen Greens of the world. And then you'll be able to see like, okay, who are they investing in? Who are the founders there? Okay, follow them. And you'll just start to like find sub communities and little pockets. But yeah, I can have a think about that, and I can maybe like send it to, I think Farah, is that who was organizing this, and maybe she can share it out with you all. But yeah, sorry, I wish I could give you more names and newsletters off the top of my head, but all the ones that I currently follow are super, super specific. So probably less helpful.
Yeah, I believe it is Farah. So I mean, I don't know. I don't know how that works. But yeah, probably she would share that with the rest of the network. But yeah. And then the last question. So she says, thank you for inspiring us and your great advice, which is very true. This has been very eye-opening. I've just moved to the US from Vietnam, so I'm kind of new to college applications, passions, and internships. Your story inspires me to try new things, and I'm really happy for that.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to be like inspirational. I'm just trying to tell you my real story. So yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me and for listening to me talk all my crap. But if you all have like any questions, like please feel free to like email me. My website's actually just on my email's on my website, kimpham.org. You can also DM me on Instagram, Kim_T Pham. I'm super like down to help. All I ask is that you have some patience because my schedule is pretty crazy, and that you be as specific as possible in your asks. So if you like, I'm more than happy to have like a 15-20 minute call with any of you if you want to dig in anywhere further, but just kind of let me know like, hey, I'm interested in learning about venture capital, or I'm interested in learning about food, just so that I can be the most helpful to you. But yeah, this has been so fun. Thank you so much, Ria, for facilitating and asking me all these great questions.
It was really fun too. Thank you so much for coming, Kim. It's like honestly very like it's awesome. I know not inspiring, but like it has been inspiring in that way. And you gave some really great advice. And so I'm so glad that I got the chance to, facilitate the conversation today. So yeah.
Yeah,
But
thank you.
yeah,
Which cool. So yeah, again, like kimpham.org, that has all of the things that you would need to reach me. I'm more than happy. Yeah, if you want to jam on anything, like I have 20 minutes for anyone. So hopefully I was helpful, and yeah, we'll talk soon.